Is there a pair who successfully learned together during the off weeks and could share their experience with other participants to inspire engagement with partner learning between sessions? Send out an email to your participants well before the session, reminding them to set time for the partner learning if they've not already done so, and letting them know when and where you'll be meeting for the gratitude session. Send them the link to the Curse of Blessings story and ask them to take about 5 minutes to read the story before the session and come ready to share their thoughts and explore the connections between gratitude and blessing. Before jumping into the gratitude session, I'd like to ask you to think a little bit now about the learning we did last month on hospitality and how that affected you. In my own life over Sukkot, I was more mindful about inviting to my sukkah guests who I did not know and who could benefit from a warm welcome, good food, and a nurturing sukkah experience. I would love to hear your answer. The best way to let me and others know is by posting on the Year of Growth Facebook page. We suggest at the beginning of your next session on gratitude that you similarly take a few minutes to reflect with your women on how the learning from last month affected them. You can either do a go around the room and each person share, or you can split your women into groups of 3 or 4, so each woman has a bit more time to share how the learning affected her. Before your group reflects upon the learning, remind everyone that this is a safe space and that nothing that is said in the room gets repeated, even to husbands and partners. On pages 46 and 47, you have some suggestions for leading the session. It includes a link to the Curse of Blessings short story, and you can send this link in the letter you send the women before meeting. Hopefully you women will have read the story before they arrive at the session. If needed, invite somebody to briefly retell the story. Elicit from the group some of the lessons of the story and how those lessons apply to their lives. In the booklet, the section titled Suggestions for How to Lead This Session has 3 discussion questions. Use them or choose other questions to explore the theme of blessing and gratitude. Close the conversation with introducing the Hebrew expression hakarat hatov. Explain that while it is often translated as gratitude, the literal meaning is about recognizing and acknowledging the good. Ask the women, how was the Curse of Blessings story about hakarat hatov? At this point, you may wish to bring in some of the scientific findings linking acknowledgement of the good, hakarat hatov, with greater happiness. Dr. Rick Hansen, a neuropsychologist, has written a book about hardwiring happiness, the new brain science of contentment, calm, and confidence. He says that we're hardwired to remember negative experiences better than positive experiences, because as a species, our survival had depended on remembering where danger might be lurking. For most people, if we go through a day in which we wake up in the morning, get our work done, have some nice conversations, talk on the phone to a family member, take a walk, and have some small negative experiences, then when we go to sleep at night, what we remember, are the negative experiences. Our biology does this to protect us, but of course it actually causes us stress and anxiety. Dr. Hansen suggests and insists that we can change our body's hardwiring to focus not only on the bad, by deliberately thinking about and savoring the good experiences. The practice he recommends is to take 20 to 30 seconds to actively and deliberately relish good experiences. This practice, what in Hebrew we call hakarat hatov, acknowledging the good, can change our brains and make us happy, content, and calm. Here at the bottom of the page, I've given you some links to his work on the subject, a fabulous TED Talk, and an article in Inc. magazine about his book. Our sages have advocated such a practice of pausing to acknowledge the good for generations. The Talmud, redacted in the year 500 of the Common Era, recounts that Rabbi Meir says that a person is obligated to say 100 blessings a day. Pause 100 times a day Stop what you're doing and acknowledge the good. But what's the difference between acknowledging the good and reciting a blessing? Pause here and let your women explore this question. Blessings go a step beyond acknowledging the good to also acknowledge the source of goodness. God certainly does not need us to bless. God wants us to be happy. God wants us to experience pleasure in our lives. The designer of the human body doesn't need to wait for Dr. Hansen's research to recommend we pause many times a day, acknowledging the good and the source of goodness. Acknowledging blessings all around us gives us pleasure, calm, and courage. The Harvard Health newsletter notes, with gratitude, people acknowledge the goodness in their lives. In the process, people usually recognize that the source of goodness lies, at least partially, outside themselves. As a result, gratitude also helps people connect to something larger than themselves as individuals, whether to other people, nature, or a higher power. Explain that making 100 blessings a day is not meant to be only a metaphor. In fact, many Jews actually strive to say 100 blessings a day. On Shabbat, when the prayer service includes fewer blessings than on a weekday, they search out extra excuses to make blessings so that they hit the 100 mark. After offering some time for questions, teach participants some blessings, including some they may never have heard of, on food, on rainbows, on seeing beautiful scenes in nature, on seeing a wise person or a head of state. While learning traditional blessings may inspire some, assure the group that they can say blessings using their own words in their native tongue. You may or may not want to use the discussion questions in the booklet to deepen your conversation about the requirement of 100 blessings a day. You may at this point wish to have participants fill out the worksheet section of the booklet, where they can consider where they are with gratitude, with blessings, and wonder what gets in their way. Here are 2 ideas that might help participants bring Rabbi Meir's message into their lives. Ask the women to think of their favorite blessing or to make one up for something that is a blessing in their life. Go around and have the women share and explain their choice. Encourage the women to brainstorm with their families, perhaps at the dinner table one night this week, a list of 100 things they enjoy and want to acknowledge. Suggest they write them down and hang the list up somewhere they'll see it often, such as the door or on the refrigerator. At this point, move on to introduce the morning prayer that our tradition encourages us to say as we open our eyes in the morning. It's the Moda Ani prayer. Begin by explaining the word modeh, which comes from the Hebrew word todah, which means thank you. Because the Hebrew language is gender sensitive, in modern Hebrew a man would say modeh and a woman would say moda. Ani means I. Some women say modeh ani, using the male version, because that is how the original liturgy was written. And some say moda ani, which is the feminine version. In this webinar, I'll refer to the prayer as modeh ani. The word modeh has a second meaning in Hebrew, beyond thank you. It also means to admit. When we're grateful, we basically admit to another that we are in debt to them for something. Thank you can mean I admit that what is in front of me is of value and not my entitlement, and I'm grateful to you for giving it to me. This admittance diminishes ego and helps build healthy relationships and a self-esteem that is more grounded, connected, and honest. A related interesting note on this prayer is that in Hebrew, saying I thank would be ani modeh or ani moda. But instead the wording is reversed and the expression is modeh ani. Why the switch? Some say That is so as not to have the first word out of our mouth in the morning be I. Some of your women may know the Modani prayer. Others may not. Some Jewish mothers teach their little ones to start every morning with the Modani prayer. It's often taught with a melody. Parents and children sometimes sing together in the morning. Long before the children understand its significance, they sing it as part of their morning ritual. Sing the Modani with your participants so that they know it well enough to share with their own families. On page 41 of the booklet, there are links to some beautiful Modani melodies. For city leaders who don't like to sing, this is a great opportunity for involving a participant. A week or so before the session, ask a participant who you know is musical if she could lead the singing of Modani and teach the song to others in the group. If someone is musical, they may be willing to learn it themselves in order to teach it to others. Sometimes it's difficult to say the Modani and face the morning. Rabbi Nachman of Breslov suggests that acknowledging a good point in ourselves is a good way to start the day. The human tendency to remember the negative may be related to the fact that for some of us it's easier to recognize our faults than our good points. But it is essential that we open our eyes and our hearts to our good points, or as Rabbi Nachman calls them in Hebrew, our nekudot tovot. In case you're interested in explaining this Hebrew term to your women, the word nekudot in Hebrew means points. In the gender-sensitive Hebrew, the word is female, and the female plural of good, tov, is tovot. Starting the day with personal appreciation and acknowledgement of self-worth can engage inner strength to overcome challenges and to accomplish the unique job that each of us was sent to this world to accomplish. Give women some quiet time to write out some of their own good points and the special strengths and gifts they bring to the world. A powerful way to reinforce a feeling of acknowledging the good is through an activity called a river of life. As I mentioned before, you may wish to ask a participant to help lead this activity. Give out paper and pencil and invite women to write key events and turning points in their lives. Ask them to also consider gratitude, blessing points along the way, times on their life journey where they had experiences for which they're grateful, even if those times were initially challenging. When ready, have the women each take a poster board and markers and invite them to draw their life paths, starting from birth until now. They can illustrate their life path as a flowing river moving from one place to another, sometimes shifting course. Emphasize that this does not have to exhaustively cover all the events in their life, but it should relate to some of the most important or noteworthy twists and turns. Consider putting some gentle music in the background as the women work. Join them as they create their river of life. Take the time and also create your own. Make sure that anybody that is worried about not being artistic knows that this is not about the art. When participants have completed their River of Life boards, invite them to split into pairs and to each take 5 minutes to share with a partner some aspects of their poster or what it was like to work on it. Invite the listener to listen attentively with an eye to silently and lovingly acknowledging good points in the other person. Once the person finished sharing, the listener can ask opening questions, such as those in the booklet. As you look back on your river of life, how does it make you feel? Are there any points in your river of life that felt like disappointments or obstacles at the time, but that you now see as blessings? As you move forward in your river of life, what practices might support you to appreciate the blessings that you have? Set a timer that will chime after 5 minutes, signaling pairs to switch speaker and listener roles. Once you regather as a whole group, discuss with participants how they can go forward and look at their lives as a river of blessing. How can they model for their families an attitude of gratitude and an awareness of goodness? What can this awareness of blessing impel them to do? For those of you in the United States, you may wish to end by showing your group page 40 in the booklet with some ideas for incorporating hakarat hatov and blessings into their family Thanksgiving celebrations. This is a great way for them to bring their learning home to their families and to connect their Jewish and secular lives. I also want to bring to your attention President Lincoln's Thanksgiving Declaration from October 3, 1863, in the middle of the Civil War, where he established the third Thursday in November as the Thanksgiving holiday, and where he gives thanks to God for all the blessings the nation is experiencing, even in the midst of war. This is a beautiful additional reading for your women's Thanksgiving table. Before you end your session, there are a few very important things to do. First, remind participants that while this is the end of our group time together, the learning about gratitude will go on in the paired learning time. Give the women time to schedule their partner learning. Giving them a bit of time during the session is a great way to help it happen. They could schedule a full hour or as little as just 15 minutes a week. Some may want to set an early morning time and say the Moda Ani together. Look through the rest of the booklet with them and point out the juicy, fascinating topics to be covered in the partner learning. The story of Leah, the first person in the Torah to say thank you. If they do nothing else, encourage them to read this important story that explains so much about what it means to be a Jew. There's also the challenge to find hakarat hatov even in difficult times. The story of the heroine Hannah Senesh and her famous poem, Walk to Caesarea. And there's the responsibility that being the recipient of blessings, such as having enough food, puts upon us to share with those who do not have enough to eat. Point out page 41 in the booklet and encourage participants to use these suggestions to bring home the learning to their families. Part of our work as mothers is to teach our children gratitude. Encourage the women to select a gratitude journal and to write down 3 things for which they are grateful before they go to bed each night. Tell them in the next session you'll be asking them about this practice and how it affected them. Make time for a proper closing. Summarize briefly some of the ideas that came up in the session and go around the room inviting participants to say in just one sentence something that they will be taking from this session back into their lives. Encourage participants to bring the learning home with them, such as by making a family list of 100 blessings, or saying Modeh Ani together as a family, or just with their child, or incorporating a gratitude practice into their family rituals. Let the women know when and where the next session will take place, and ask who is interested in co-leading some of the session with you. My final word about hakarat hatov today are dedicated to you. Thank you. Thank you for being part of our pilot group. So far, we've gotten some excellent feedback that will help make this Year of Growth project more powerful and meaningful. Please take the time to give us feedback about the webinar and about the session. We're depending on your wisdom, expertise, and practical experience teaching these sessions. Thank you again for being such an important part of our team.